Hi everyone, Allie here from TheFamilyMeeple, and today I am back with the wrap up for my 2023 10x5 solo challenge. In 2023, I did 3 separate 10x5 solo challenges. The first 2 both lasted 4 months. The third one I did not complete on time by the end of December, but because the challenge is primarily to give myself incentive to actually play the games in my collection using the solo modes and experience them over a more condensed period of time, I decided to give myself some grace over the holidays and extended it to the end of January. I was able to complete the plays in January, and so today we're going to talk about the 10 games that I played during that final third challenge and how I liked each of them. I will be ranking the games from 10 to 1 based on the solo mode alone. My ranking for these games multiplayer is not always the same as solo, but we're going to take a look at the solo modes. Coming in at number 10 is Skyward. Skyward is a multiplayer game that is an I split you choose mechanism. The game was originally kickstarted, and there was a solo mode from the original designer that was included in the Kickstarter campaign as sort of a Kickstarter promo or incentive. The solo mode from the Kickstarter campaign was published in a rough draft version and shared on Board Game Geek. But the final version of the solo mode, including additional play modes and AI player setups, has never been released on Board Game Geek, despite the game having been published several years ago. And that was my number one reason for dropping this down to a lower rating and why it's coming in at the bottom. The solo instructions that were included on Board Game Geek are not the best. Like I said, it's a rough draft version of what the designer was working on, so it's probably about 90% there, but it has some rough edges. Some of the instructions didn't make a lot of sense or referred to illustrations or graphics that didn't exist in the file, so you sort of had to figure it out on your own. It also only included a single AI opponent setup or configuration, which to me just sort of got stale and boring. I didn't want to play against the same configuration every time. Overall, Skyward is a game that I'm going to keep in my collection for multiplayer games. I actually have not had a chance to play it multiplayer yet. So until I have that opportunity and see how it plays in that multiplayer mode, it's going to stick around. I love the artwork. I love the concept and the idea of Skyward. It just, for me, doesn't work fantastic as a solo, and it probably isn't one I will pull out for solo play in the future. Coming in at number 9 is Wayfarers of the South Tigris. Wayfarers of the South Tigris is quite a heavy Euro game. It is dice worker placement or dice action selection as the main mechanism. And then there's a lot of tableau building in the game. So you're going to be collecting cards and adding them to the tableau out in front of you so that you can take different actions, improve your actions, get benefits, and all the while you're moving up this journal track in the middle on the main board that is the timer for the game. Wayfarers of the South Tigris includes a solo mode in the base game that was included in the original. It's not extra, it just comes with the base game retail. And it comes with several different AI bots. So it is an AI opponent, and they basically play by completely different rules than the player does. And this is the reason why it's coming in at number 9 for me. I have played Wayfarers of the South Tigris multiplayer before and absolutely loved my play of this multiplayer. Had a great time with the game. I loved the multiplayer, how you have to pace yourself off of the other players at the table. You're paying attention to what they're doing and trying to gauge what is best based off of that. With the solo mode, and I played all of the different AI bots in the game, and it just always felt very defeating. I never won any of my games. There was one, I think the very last game, where I came sort of close and didn't get absolutely completely like steamrolled by the AI player. But the entire game, as I was playing, I felt defeated. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to keep up, that I wasn't keeping up. The AI player is just collecting cards, collecting the tokens off of the board, getting all of this stuff for basically free. And I didn't like how hemmed in I felt by this game in the solo. Now, again, this is one that I really enjoy multiplayer, so I will play this again if I get the opportunity to play it at higher player counts, but it is one that has already left my collection as a primarily solo player when it comes to these medium to heavier weight games. This is just not one that I wanted to get to the table again after those 5 plays. Coming in at number 8 is Hardback. Hardback is a deck building game where you are creating words out of the cards that are in your hand. Hardback is typically a multiplayer game, although it does include a solo mode in the original game box. The solo mode is actually a cooperative mode for the game, so you could play this mode as multiplayer as well if you wanted to play with other people. You just don't want to compete with them. Maybe you want to help. You have some younger kids, you're using it as a learning opportunity. You could play this cooperative mode, or you can play it solo. It's a very simple mode. You are playing against a AI player to a certain extent. How it works is on your turn, you're going to play basically completely normally. You have a hand of 5 cards, which you can potentially increase by spending ink tokens. If you spend ink tokens on a card, then that card must be included as part of the word that you play that turn. If you have ink remover tokens, then you can get rid of that if for some reason you don't want to play that card or can't play that into your word. But you'll want to play out all of the cards in your hand to create words to earn prestige points, and then also earn money to purchase cards, additional cards from the offer row that allow you to do different abilities. Some of the cards will allow you to trash cards out of your deck from like your starter cards, so you can get rid of those that aren't really earning you very many points or money as you go through, and to kind of tailor your deck so that you have letters in there that you know you can make really strong, long, well-scoring words from. The AI player at the end of your turn will take whichever card is in the offer row on the far right, and they will score points based on the cost, the coin cost of that card. So they are just earning points at the end of each of your turns, and if you can get to 60 points total before the AI does, then you win. This is one that I find very relaxing. It's definitely one that's going to stay in my collection. I have played it multiplayer and enjoy it multiplayer as well. But the reason that it's coming in down sort of towards the bottom is sometimes I'm just not in the mood to think that hard. I don't have a fantastic vocabulary. It's okay, but not amazing. So I do find it challenging to get to 60 points before that AI player does. A lot of times if there is a very high cost card on the end of the row, you know that AI is going to score maybe 7 points at the end of your turn, but you just don't have the ability to earn 7 coins to buy that card to prevent them from doing that. So there wasn't a lot of mitigation in being able to manipulate which card the AI was going to draw for that turn. And so some games were fairly swingy, where it just happened to be that they were going to get those high point cards turn after turn after turn. And then in other games, that wasn't the case. But if you are a fan of Scrabble and you are a fan of deck building games and you're looking for something that you can play that's a word game solo, this is one that I would recommend you check out. That's Hardback. Number 7 is Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is a classic game from quite a while back. It's one that I picked up, I believe, in 2020 when I was sort of first really getting into the board gaming hobby. I've had my copy for a while, and usually when I want to play Terraforming Mars, I will pull out the digital app and play it on my tablet. but recently, I don't know if they just stopped supporting the app on my tablet or what the reason is, but the like the illustrations or the graphics don't really work on my tablet anymore. So I found myself playing it less and less. And as a result, I decided to add the physical board game to my challenge from last year so that I'd get my actual copy of the game out. The actual game comes with a solo mode included in the base game. I also have the Prelude expansion, which includes a slightly modified separate solo mode that you can play. I played both of them during the challenge and had fun with both. In the original solo mode, you are playing essentially against a timer. You have 14 years or generations, so 14 turns, in which you have to terraform the entire planet by yourself. So that means that you have to increase the oxygen levels up to the max. You have to place all of the ocean tiles, and you have to increase the temperature up to the max as well. If you've played Terraforming Mars multiplayer, then you will know that those tracks are quite lengthy and it takes a lot of work to get them all of the way up there. When you're playing the original solo mode, I found that you can feel at times a little bit like you're boxed in because you are trying so hard to get that terraforming rating up where you're having to increase the temperature, you're having to place greenery tiles, and you're having to place out those ocean tiles. So the cards that you're drafting to keep in your hand and the cards that you're buying are very specific to increasing those global parameters. You're not going to be playing a lot of cards that have to do with getting points based on tags or using like the microbes or the animals. Those cards tend to be ones that in the solo game for the original, I just throw out. I know for a fact that I'm not going to use them because I need to focus all of my efforts towards terraforming Mars. In the updated solo mode from the Prelude expansion, it relaxes that where you don't have to terraform the whole planet within 14 generations, but it does still have the same sort of clock timer where you have 14 generations, but the goal now is to reach a certain terraforming rating by the end of those 14 generations. And so it gives you a little bit more flexibility to lean into some of those cards that maybe aren't helpful in the original solo game, but can offer you ways to increase your terraforming rating. I really enjoyed my plays of Terraforming Mars, and I love at the end of that game where you have all these cards laid out in front of you and the planet is terraformed and you just feel this sense of satisfaction that you've accomplished something. Even when you come up short, it usually feels pretty good that you did, as best as you could with what you had to work with for that game. So I enjoyed my games of Terraforming Mars, and it's definitely one that I'm going to keep around for a while and play solo, as well as hopefully get some plays in multiplayer. So that is number 7, Terraforming Mars. Number 6 is Steampunk Rally Fusion. Steampunk Rally Fusion is a steampunk-themed game. It's a racing game that I originally saw when I believe it was on Kickstarter, and it did not include a solo mode. So despite the fact that I was very drawn to the steampunk theme and the art and the look of the game, I passed up on it because I play a lot of games solo and it didn't have one. A little while after the Kickstarter campaign funded and people started getting their games, I actually went back and noticed that as part of the Kickstarter campaign, they had incorporated a solo mode into the game. So I picked up a copy of this one, and the production quality is just absolutely fantastic for this game. The solo mode plays very simply. You will play on your own, and there's no AI player that you're trying to beat. You're just trying to get as far as you can along the racetrack before the end of, I believe it's 6 rounds is what you get to play. There's a couple of modifications that I made to the original solo mode as I was playing. The original game, if you're playing multiplayer, will give you a set number of track pieces to use. I think it's 6 total for the multiplayer game. But in the solo game, they actually tell you to use all 8 of the track pieces, which in my plays, I found that in 6 rounds, I couldn't get to the end of all 8 of those track pieces. It just never really seemed to be achievable. And in my solo games, I tend to like goals that feel challenging but achievable. So to improve on this, I basically just modified the rules, house ruled it to say, if I want to play on, quote, easy mode, then I'll play with the 6 track pieces that are in the multiplayer rules. If I want to play on what I would consider normal mode, then I play with 7. And if I want to play on a hard mode, then I'll include all 8, like the original solo mode. I also played with a minor tweak that I found on Board Game Geek, which simulates better the drafting in the multiplayer game. So in the multiplayer game, you'll actually have a hand of 4 cards, one of each of the different types of cards, and you'll pick a card and then you pass it around in a standard draft fashion until you have, until all of the cards have been drafted. Everybody has 4, and then you get to use those cards. So the modification that I found online was you create 4 stacks of each of the 4 cards. The first stack you pull from, you get to pick whichever one you want. You look at all 4, you pick one. The third stack, you randomly discard 1 card and you pick from 3. Then you discard 2 from the third stack, you pick from the 2 that are left, and then you just randomly get 1 of the cards from that 4th stack. So it simulates those cards being passed around the table and the choices diminishing as they go around. So I really enjoyed that slight modification. I love the dice placement in this game. You are building up your engine with these cards that you're drafting, and then you're playing them out onto your contraption or your flying machine that you're flying down this track. And you have to worry about the heat that you're creating, so you can actually vent the dice by spending cogs to repair them and basically reduce the number of pips on them so that you can clear it out and use those cards again. Or you can, just choose to at some point kind of go too fast and let your contraption get damaged, so then you can get rid of those cards that have dice on them that you weren't going to vent. There's so many nice choices in this game, and I really enjoyed my solo plays of this. This is one I haven't played multiplayer yet, but is one that is definitely high on my list to play as a multiplayer game. This is probably one that I will be bringing to the Hoodie Cat Game Lounge here in Charleston, South Carolina for one of my Learn and Play events. So look forward to that if you're here in the South Carolina Lowcountry. I'll be bringing this one soon. But that is my number 6, Steampunk Rally Fusion. All right, number 5 is 51st State, the Ultimate Edition. So 51st State is a game that I have played multiplayer. I originally learned it at the Dice Tower Retreat and really enjoyed this game and particularly the multi-use cards element of it. It's another game that features drafting. So in the solo game, there's a little bit of that drafting in it. Whereas you get to pick during if you're first player, you get to pick your cards. And if you are the second player, then the AI is going to take cards before you get to pick. The Ultimate Edition actually includes several different solo modes or solo variants that you can play with. I did play with both the original base game solo mode, which is very, very simple to operate. And then I also played with the updated I think it's called the Borgo solo mode, which is a more robust AI solo mode. So in 51st States, you are building out a tableau of cards in front of you. You can play the cards from your hand as actual building sites as part of your tableau. You can flip them over and play them as a trade deal to increase your resource production at the top of your board. And then there's a couple other things you can do as far as if you have a building out in front of you and a card matches, then you can actually upgrade that building with a different one from your hand that maybe was more expensive. And if you have had a building that was raised by the AI player in the solo mode, then you can also upgrade those with cards from your hand. So you're using all of these cards and you are trying to collect resources and earn victory points. And your goal is to be the first one to get to 25 victory points. In the solo mode, you are racing against the actual AI with the Borgo player. And it feels very like a race. Like they are going to push you. They are going to go up on that track. There's also different modes for difficulty, which I appreciate. The reason that this is coming in at number 5, despite the fact that I very much enjoy the game and I liked playing it solo, is that the solo rules for the Borgo AI, which I liked better than the base game one, is not intuitive. And I found that even after 4 or 5 plays, I had to have the rule book open on the table while I was playing so that every time I flipped over one of those cards, I could look and see, okay, this symbol does this. And I'd have to reference exactly what each of the AI's actions did. So one of the things that would be nice is to have a small player aid that had that information on it. So once you've read the rules, all you need is the symbols to tell you when it's this symbol, he does this. When it's this symbol, he does this. One of the nice things, though, is that it does incorporate all of the expansion content that came in the Ultimate Edition. So if you want to play with any of the additional expansion content, the extra decks, any of that, those are all included and you can throw those in. It's not a big rules shift when you add those in. It tends to be one action, then the Borgo AI will do something different if you're playing with the expansion versus playing without the expansion. So that is number 5, 51st State. Number 4 is a bit of a surprise. This is Pocket Master Builder. Pocket Master Builder is a tiny box card game that is designed for 1 to 2 players only. Pocket Master Builder is a resource management game and not quite a tableau builder because you have a display out in the middle of the table that if you were playing as 2 players, you'd be playing together onto the same section of the table. So you will have cards in your hand, which are also sort of multi-use cards. You can use them to place out into the center. So you're starting to build buildings out into the middle of the table. Or you can also use them to discard for resources on your turn. I really enjoyed Pocket Master Builder. It's a nice little puzzle of how do you use your cards. In the solo mode, like in a multiplayer, you have to play a card out into the center every single turn. That's not optional. You have to play a card out. But then once you've done that, you get to decide how many of your markers that you have available you're going to place out onto the card that you just played that you can then on a future turn pull back to use those as resources to actually build the buildings. So when you place these cards out, you don't build the building at that time, and you don't actually get any points for placing the card out. You only get points for actually building that building by turning in those resources either on that turn or a future turn. So it's a really neat little puzzle. I like the simplicity of how they used the cards to track your different resources. None of your resources carry over, so it's very important to try to plan out when and how you're going to draw these cubes back from the cards that you've placed out and discard cards from your hand so that you can afford to build all of these buildings. There's a lot of little other things going on in the game, but it's one that I certainly will continue to come back to. I would like to try it 2-player and see how it feels at that player count, but it's a nice little solo game. If you're looking for something that comes in a small box, you could travel with it, although it does take up a fair amount of table space. So although the box is small and you could take it with you, you will need a reasonably like a card table sized table to play this game on. So that is my number 4, Pocket Master Builder. All right, number 3 is The Bloody Inn. The Bloody Inn is a card game that is designed for 1 to 4 players. It's one of my absolute favorite games in my collection. It's one of the most common games that I will pull out to play solo, and it is the first game for this challenge that I actually finished all 5 plays of. The main reason for that is that it plays very, very quickly. It does not have a long setup time. It is basically a deck of cards and a few tokens that you need to get out. It has a small board, and then you are ready to go. You can start playing. The deck of cards, you will take out a little bit about roughly half of the cards for each of the games. And so you start becoming familiar with what cards are in the deck, but you may not see all of them in each of your plays. So you do have to adapt to which cards are actually in the deck while you're playing. The Bloody Inn is another multi-use card game. So in the game, you are going to be trying to make money by killing patrons of the inn and then burying them under annexes that you control. So you start the game with a single card, which is your player reference. It counts as 1 annex building. And as you play through, you will have 2 turns or 2 actions that you can take. And then you will have to send guests on their way. They'll check out. If they're in one of your rooms, you will get paid for them. It's a very small amount that you'll get paid. And then you'll invite new guests. The trick with the Bloody Inn, particularly in solo, is that you cannot, at any point during the game, have an unburied corpse out in your play area if there are any policemen in the inn when they check out. So if there is a policeman in the inn and they check out and you have an unburied corpse, in the multiplayer game, you would simply have to pay 10 money or 10 francs in order to properly bury them in the church cemetery, and you cannot take their money in that use case. So it's a penalty, but it's not the end of the world. In the solo game, if you have that unburied corpse and the policeman leaves the inn, you immediately lose. So it takes a lot of planning and thinking about, can I actually get this corpse buried in case a cop comes out on the next round is typically what you're looking at. So some of the actions that you can take is to bribe some of the patrons that are at your inn or peasants from the bar, and then those cards go into your hand. They become your accomplices, and at the end of each round, you have to pay for the number of accomplices that you have because they don't work for free. Any cards that are in your hand, except for the peasants, you can actually then on a subsequent turn use cards in order to build them as annexes, which will give you either an immediate benefit or ongoing benefits for the rest of the game. It also provides additional annex spaces where you can build corpses. The number of cards that you have to spend to take these actions depends on the strength of the card that you're trying to activate or take the action on. So for example, if I am trying to kill a patron in the inn with a strength of 2, then I have to spend 2 of my accomplices in order to do that. And then once they're killed, I have to spend 2 accomplices again in order to bury them under an annex. So this is one that I have had so much fun with. I have talked about it on quite a few other videos and panels. It was in my top 100. This is one that likely will never leave my collection. I have played it multiplayer as well, and it is an absolute blast every time. I know it shouldn't be fun playing a game about murder, but it is one of my absolute favorites. So if you have a chance, if you have not checked out The Bloody Inn, definitely check that one out. All right, number 2 is Le Granja, which is the deluxe master set is the one that I have. And this is a game that I picked up during their recent Kickstarter. I had played the original on Board Game Arena only. I have never played the original in a physical copy, but I learned and played the original on Board Game Arena. Absolutely loved. Again, this is another multi-use card game. It's definitely something that I am drawn to. And this one has a little bit of area control, area majority. Definitely the multi-use cards are the main thing. Resource management is a big part of this game, and the Deluxe Master Set comes with a bunch of modular expansions that are in the box. It's a very big box. Sometimes it'll take a while to set up, and that is actually one of the reasons that I dropped it down just slightly, is that the setup and teardown time is a little bit on the longer end. And then the complexity is a little bit higher as well. The base game, once you understand it, is actually not too complex. There are 2 different solo modes included in the deluxe version of the game. The original solo mode is more or less a beat your own score. It's a nice way to sort of step into the game if you haven't played it before, learn the base game rules, play just as you would with a multiplayer game, and see how high you can get on your score. The other solo mode that was included with the deluxe version is a David Turczi design, and it is certainly on the more complex end of a solo AI. It does have its own set of rules and how it interacts with the game. It has its own player board that it uses and a deck of cards. I was a little bit nervous going into this one, knowing that it was a David Turczi design, that it would be a very convoluted and complex solo mode, and I'm happy to say that that's not what I found. Although it is a little bit higher on the complexity for a AI solo mode, it's not that bad once you get used to it. And one of the greatest things about it is that, with the exception of I think 1 or 2 of the modules, it includes rules to play with all of the module content. So if you are primarily a solo player and you're thinking about picking up Le Grand Ha, if you can get a copy of the deluxe version with the solo mode and all of the additional modules, I highly, highly recommend it. I played, I think at least 2 of my games were just the original base game, definitely 2, because I played with the original solo mode first to kind of reacquaint myself with the rules. And then I played with just the base components, and then I did add in, I believe, 3 of the different modules during the last couple of plays. And the solo mode, like I said, it's an AI driven. One of the nice things about it, though, is that the player board that they provide you for the AI player gives you nearly all of the information that you need to run that AI player. And so I very rarely had to actually go back and reference the rule book when I was playing this one solo. Although it was heavier, like I said, I didn't feel like I had to go back all the time. Most of the information, if not all of the information, was right there on the player board or on the cards. So that was fantastic. It's an absolutely beautiful production. The quality of the components is fantastic. It has metal coins and metal victory points. The artwork is beautiful, and then really the shining star is those multi-use cards and trying to figure out when best to use them on which part of your board and how to really optimize all of your turns. So that is number 2, Le Grand Ha. All right, that leaves us with just one left, which is Vinhos. This is the deluxe version of the game that came out in 2016. This is a Vital Lacerda game. It is, I think, one of only 2 that I own in my collection right now. Vinhos is a game that I got as a gift from a friend of mine. I enjoy having ladies' game nights, and we typically drink wine. I enjoy drinking wine. And so this game, I think, really spoke to her from that theme perspective. I hadn't really considered it earlier than when she picked it up for me, simply because when I really started getting into this hobby, I was very worried that it would be too complex of a game. All you ever hear really about Lacerda games is, oh, they're really heavy, they're really heavy. And although that is true, that these games have a good amount of strategic depth to them, I have found that with both The Gallerist and Vinhos, the thematic ties are strong enough that the rule set themselves are not that hard to understand and get into. So in Vinhos, the Deluxe version includes a solo mode for the 2016 mode of the game. The deluxe edition of the game actually includes the original 2010 version of the rules on one side of the board, and then on the other side of the board it includes an updated version of the rule set for 2016, and that's where the solo mode is included. So that 2016 board is actually the simpler of the two from what I understand, because it removes the banking aspect of the game, which adds some amount of complexity to the strategic decisions that you're having to make throughout the game. But it's a very, very simple to run solo mode. It does include an AI player that you're playing against, and at its heart, Vinhos is a worker placement or action selection game. So you have in the center of the board 9 squares in the middle, and on your turn, you have to move from the location you're at to a new location. You can move for free to any of the locations that are right next to you. So if you were in the middle, you could actually go anywhere theoretically for free. If you wanted to move an extra space from where you're at, then you're going to have to pay some of your money to move farther. And in the solo mode, the solo player not only basically blocks off spaces and makes them more expensive, just like in a multiplayer game. So if I go to a location where someone else already is, I have to pay them. In the solo mode, if I go to the location where the AI player is, I have to pay the bank. However, the AI player also will bribe or leave money behind. So anytime it takes an action, when it leaves that space, it leaves one of the Bago chips behind. And so now if you go to that location where they previously were or where they are, you still have to pay. So a lot of the actions that you're taking become more expensive, and it makes planning very, very important. One of the nice things about playing Vinhos is that although the rules don't change a lot from game to game, there are 9 different locations for vineyards in the original game. I also purchased the expansion content, which adds 2 additional vineyards and some additional gameplay elements to the base original box. But you don't play with all of those. So when you're playing solo, you're actually going to take 2 out. So you only have 7 of the possible vineyards available. So each game you're going to be wanting to play just slightly differently. The game also has weather conditions that change from game to game, so you don't really know what's coming up. There's different goals and different targets where you're going to have to be a little bit agile and thinking on your feet. You try to plan as best you can, but you just never really know what's going to come up on those tiles. So this is one that I really had a fantastic time with. I have not had a chance to play this multiplayer yet, but it is one that I am looking forward to teaching my friend when we have some time that we can dig into something a bit heavier. So that is my number 1, which is Vinhos Deluxe Edition. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming by. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I tried today to keep it a bit shorter than I have in the past, and hopefully this new sort of streamlined format works for you and you keep coming back. I have started my first challenge for 2024. I have 10 more solo games that I will be playing. For 2024, I did slightly modify the challenge and I have relaxed it a bit. The first challenge is going to run through the end of June, and then the second challenge is going to be the full 6 months, July through December, to give myself a little bit of breathing space. I've also set myself a challenge to play all of my solo games by the end of the year, and some other challenges around playing physical copies of games, playing games on Board Game Arena, so just total plays, and playing the games on my shelf of shame and some old favorites that have not seen the table in a while. So once again, thanks so much for coming along. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to our channel and have a wonderful time playing games with your family, friends, and especially solo. Bye.